Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Finance, Regeneration and Property Scrutiny Select Committee. For the benefit of our watcher on YouTube, members of the committee are present in the chamber and these members will be voting on proposals this evening, or there would be if we actually had any to vote on. Other members of the council are also in attendance and or participating via MS Teams and can take part in discussions, obviously won't be voting. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how meetings will be conducted, including the ground rules. And before we start with the formal business, we will confirm attendance of voting members by doing a roll call, and I'll ask Al to do that.
Good morning. Evening, Councillor. This is just to confirm your attendance. If you can just confirm you're present when I call your name. Councillor Bennison.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor Bishop, substituted by Councillor Bridge.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor Boxall, Councillor Cannon.
Present.
Councillor Chapman.
Present.
Councillor Clokey.
Present.
Councillor Harman.
Present.
Councillor Palmer. Councillor Parry.
Present.
Councillor Pilgrim.
Present.
Councillor Rhodes.
Yeah.
Councillor Tanner.
Present.
And Councillor Williams.
Present.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask the officers to introduce themselves at this point?
Good evening, members. My name is Paul Worden. I'm the Head of Finance and Section 151 Officer.
Good evening, members. Jeremy Whitaker, Economic Development and Special Projects Manager.
Good evening, Stuart Edwards, Head of Administrative and Property Services.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, we've dealt with item 2, apologies for absence, and also item 3, notification of substitute members. Any declarations of interest? Direction? No, that's fine. And are we happy to confirm the minutes of the last? Okay, well, on to business in that case. We have item 6, Cabinet Member Report, Infrastructure and Tunbridge Regeneration, which I believe Adam is going to introduce with the help of Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for having me at your committee. Obviously, I'm not a member. If it's all right with you, I'll just talk you through some of the highlights of the report as to what I've been doing over the last year since becoming Cabinet Member. So firstly, sort of paragraph 4.1 of the report, we've been writing to local infrastructure providers and trying to urge them to engage with the local plan process and tell us what the infrastructure needs might be arising from our sort of housing targets. Particularly one of note was the letter that I wrote to South East Water's Chief Executive following the problems with water that many parts of the borough experienced recently. And their response was, I suppose, somewhat concerning, that they didn't seem to appreciate just how high our housing targets were and the possible impacts on sort of water delivery for our residents if these targets are delivered. So we're still looking into that one quite closely, and officers have got a further meeting with South East Water. On a similar vein, highways, I think it's a key concern of members is what are the highways impacts of the local plan going to be, and what highways infrastructure might we need to deliver. So we're having a look at possibly commissioning some further independent highways advice in certain areas of the borough to kind of understand what the impact might be on infrastructure, again, through the impact of the local plan. Moving on, so obviously the council doesn't directly deliver this infrastructure itself, but we work with stakeholders and partners to try and get people around the table and make that happen. One thing we've been doing is trying to deliver a medical centre in Leybourne Chase, and been working quite closely with local members on that. And then on to section 106 contributions. So I've felt that probably communication in terms of where money's being spent, how the process works, and just sort of getting that across to members and communicating maybe hasn't been as clear as it could be or should be. So something I've been working on with Eleanor and Chelsea is trying to look at ways to improve that whole process and sort of keep members a bit more informed and up to date as to where things are going. So that's something that will be coming to overview and scrutiny in the coming months. Other than that, obviously the big things that were going on in Tunbridge include the replacement Angel Centre and the East of High Street Master Plan. I won't go into too much detail on that, but the public engagement exercise with the Angel Centre started yesterday, and that's continuing on till Sunday, just trying to seek feedback from members of the public on the draft designs ahead of the submission of the planning application. So hopefully the draft designs will be of interest to everyone, and look forward to seeing what the feedback is. So yeah, that's more or less it from me, Chairman. Hopefully that helps, and yeah, let me know any questions. Thank you.
Adam, Stuart, have you got anything to add to that? No. Any questions? Wendy.
Thank you, Chair. Not so much question. Firstly, I'd like to reiterate, basically, South East Water have basically said they are not going to and hold no account for putting the infrastructure in for all these houses that we're supposedly building over the next few years. So the whole plan falls down before it even starts. Secondly, I'd like to say thank you to and for the 106 consultations that we had a meeting this morning, and I think we can build on that. I think that was a start, and I hope we can build on that to make it a lot more clear where all the funds are going. And that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Kim.
Thank you, Chair. In clause 5.1.1, it mentions that we had viability and delivery analysis completed, which was my understanding didn't come out too favourably. So I wonder if we've revisited that and the project is now possibly viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the wider East of High Street Master Plan, we haven't revisited it yet. I don't know how much sort of detail you'd like me to go into. I think it's so the wider East of High Street Master Plan includes regeneration of a number of sort of areas. So the focus is at the moment on the Angel Centre, but it was also looking at residential development on some of these parcels, possibly something like a hotel or medical centre. At the moment, we're still a bit hamstrung by very high build costs. Interest rates are sort of fairly stubborn, and the kind of the land values in that part of the town at the moment aren't kind of there to basically see a viable return on it. I think it's something we'll obviously keep under wraps, but with local government reorganisation coming up as well, we've had to kind of think about what things can we realistically prioritise and deliver in the sort of the next couple of years. So it's my view is that we deliver the Angel Centre, and that's the first kind of piece of the puzzle. It unlocks the existing site for something else in future, and slowly those kinds of things will help to raise development values in the area through time, and just make that whole part of the town more attractive, and that will assist with the viability, and then hopefully enable some residential development to come forward, and help pay for the cost of the whole thing. So hopefully that helps, Chairman.
Thanks, Kim. Mark.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not a member of your committee. It's been although it's been covered previously, 4.1 relating to the infrastructure problems that South East Water have revealed that they are unable to provide the assurances that have been required or requested. Is it possible to have copies for members to have copies of the correspondence, because this is really important. From my experience, I've asked South East Water about this, I think in this chamber and elsewhere, and they are using 2020 housing figures for their projections. Given those are the projections and not taking into account the 13,000 houses which are going to be built in Kent in every single year going forward, we have got a picture of the scale of their under delivery. So I'm really pleased to see that that's been highlighted in the paper. At 4.2, the report quite rightly also refers to the concerns around Kent County Council's approach to mitigation for new development. I'm really pleased to see that's in there. And while we talk about that, that is one of the reasons that I personally have been concerned about the junction next to the new Angel Centre site, because the land that the KCC own there is going to be necessary if they're going to increase the junction capacity there. At 4.3, the council is a significant shareholder, at least in Tunbridge Town Centre, and I think it's worth saying that if we had a little bit more cooperation, this is my personal view, not the view of the council, I hasten to add, if Sainsbury's had been a little bit more cooperative and they were open to the idea of building a multi-storey car park there, then we would be able to free up a huge amount of the car parks around there. And that, I think, is a real frustration to me, because we know that we need more residential in order to meet the demands of the local plan, and we aren't building enough social housing. If the council was building its own housing, we could ensure that there was more social housing. Just finally, we talk about health, and I just want to make the point that if we are considering putting a medical centre there, or allowing our land to be sold for a medical centre there, the scale of development actually in Tunbridge is at the other end of Tunbridge. It's not in the south. There's a little bit in the south in my own ward, but we are not obliged to mitigate for the effect of development as a council. That is the job of developers, and I think that the NHS and some of the surgeries in Tunbridge should be looking to North Tunbridge, because there's a deficit in healthcare at that end of the town. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. I'm just going to make a comment. We had a conversation before the meeting today about the infrastructure here at Kings Hill. The fact that one of the network providers is still working on a master plan from 1995, and believed there were only 500 houses here. So it tells you how out of date some of the information is. But I've got a question for you, Adam. Is there a very real chance that some of these developments won't have water and sewer connection?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's a good question. So it's a bit of a moving parts at the moment, I suppose. So officers have gone back to South East Water to kind of take them to task on some of these wrong assumptions. And yes, they do seem to have been working to completely out of date housing targets, which is concerning. I think that the trouble is, the government are not particularly sympathetic to these kinds of issues. I'm not sure how well they understand the difficulties of infrastructure delivery on this kind of scale, or the consequences of the sheer scale of housing that we're supposed to be kind of delivering. So I think that the kind of the starting point with infrastructure delivery is that, it's a question of just sort of mitigating it and providing it at some point, rather than it stopping everything from happening. But then, it raises questions like, well, where and when and how is this all going to kind of be funded? So I probably wouldn't be able to say definitively, yes or no, this is going to be able to will stop houses coming forward. I think we need to understand a little bit more from South East Water about how they're going to react to this, having been presented this information as to what our housing target actually is. If that helps, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are we happy to note report? Okay, on to item number 7, Cabinet Member Report, Economic Development, and I think that's Robin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. No, that's fine. That's fine. Yes, it is me. This is just one of many items in my portfolio. I'll start with the economic regeneration, first of all, and just highlight the 7 key areas that we're trying to do as a team. Which is promoting the borough, supporting local businesses. I'm clearly a champion of that because I run a local business. Land and premises, a greener and more productive economy, a thriving rural economy. Again, I'm a fan of that because I've got a farm. An inclusive economy and vibrant town centres. With that, it's been an extremely busy year just gone, one way or another, both with economic regeneration and certainly with property. Probably causing Stuart a few headaches, I'm sure. Anyway, for the economic side of things, it's the main key areas that we've been focusing on is the shopfront scheme that's been very successful. That was grants up to £5,000, and that's been awarded to around about 33 businesses, I think, across the borough. So if I go on to the green business grants, I've got a nice slide of this. This is slide 5 or page 5. There we go. It's working. So I thought I'd just give a few examples of where this support has been going, and it's been hugely successful in terms of green business grants. So just to highlight what it's all about, it's up to £8,000 supporting carbon reduction and making businesses more efficient. And that's around about 40% of eligible costs. Just while I'm on that subject, a new round of business grants has just been released on the 5th of February, I think it was. Yep, Jeremy's nodding his head, that's good. And that's the new scheme. It's £5,000, capped at £5,000, but we have upped the limit up to 50% contribution towards those costs of reducing carbon and making your business more efficient. So I'm plugging that now because I just want as many members to take that on board and try and advertise that new green business grant so we can get it out to as many of our local businesses as we can. So if you know any businesses that might be supported with that, then certainly send them in Jeremy's direction or my direction, and we can guide them through the application process. So yeah, so here we have just a few examples. My favourite one of those, although it doesn't really show it very well, but the one on the left there is CommuniGrow. Many of you might have heard about CommuniGrow. It's an amazing place supporting people in terms of food production mainly, which is quite fascinating how they go about it. But what they've done is their location is very isolated. So through the Green Business Grant, we supported them by basically going off grid, supporting their little education hut as such, so they can make their teas and coffees. So in that picture on the left, it doesn't really show it very well, but there's an inverter there, battery backup, and of course solar panels on the roof. So they are now completely off grid, and they can make their cups of tea and turn the lights on when the sun shines. And then in the middle there, we've got just examples. The Green Business Grant attracted so many applications for solar panels, PV panels. And there's just one example in the middle there. I think that was Kings Hill Golf Club. That's it. And then the one on the right there, a little bit more sophisticated, but it's a heating management system. And it cut the heating costs of that business by around about 40%, I think, just by intelligently managing all the heating. So that's just an example, but the main attraction was solar panels on roofs, and we even supported parish councils as well through that grant scheme. So bear that in mind. We then went on to, so this is page 4, or slide 4 if you want to call it that, West Kent Business Support Programme. Again, just a few examples. I'll let Jeremy just explain the first photo, which is Milson's, but I didn't go and visit Milson's. But if you can just say a few words about that business, Jeremy, that'd be handy.
So yeah, this is Milson's in East Peckham, and they basically got a grant for fresh food vending and delivery. So a lot of their vending machines were previously just relatively unhealthy snacks, chocolate bars, crisps, that sort of thing. But they saw a business opportunity. But in order to make that a reality, they needed a refrigerated van. So the grant went towards the purchase of that van.
Thank you, Jeremy. Right, so the second one along, again, it doesn't really show what it's about, but it's Retro Electric business. It's called Retro Electrics, and that's down 7 Mile Lane, and they are such an innovative small business in Tunbridge and Malling, but they go about converting classic cars, actually all manners of vehicles, converting them into electric vehicles. So they did some research, and so we supported them in doing further research and then sort of streamlining their conversion of electric vehicles to electric. So an example was a Porsche, actually, that I was quite fascinated by, which actually then had a speaker out the back of the tailpipes, actually producing the noise of a Porsche, but it was electric. So these are just an example of some of the business that we've been supporting over the last year. The next one along is Hutch Deli. That's a cafe deli. Again, another. If this is, I didn't explain correctly. Actually, this is West Kent Rural Grants. So this was more money, but it's supported more businesses in a wider way, not just through carbon reduction or being more efficient, but just supporting businesses to grow really. And Hutch Deli was one where we supported them with kitchen equipment so they could start the progress of opening more regularly in the evening. And then the next one on the right there is a tree surgery business. And that's a very complex piece of tree surgery equipment that we helped with as well. So you can just see a flavour of the businesses across Tunbridge Moorland that we've been supporting, but there were many, many more. I forget how many we did in total. How many was it, Jeremy?
In terms of the West Kent Rural Grants, in this round, it's been 8 schemes.
Yeah.
Previously to that, we had a further, I think it was 39.
Yeah. Right, thank you. So that was the main part of supporting local businesses through those many different grants, which were hugely successful. Then we had a digital inclusion project, which was aimed at helping people in financial hardship, unemployed young people. Again, around about 170 odd schemes approved through that scheme. So you can see as we go through, there's many, many areas that economic regeneration is supporting. I'm going to skip now to the really hefty part of my portfolio, which is property. With the help of Stuart and team, thank you, Stuart. This has been a really, really busy last few months, or last year actually. Now the focus has mainly been on, again, solar panels. We've sort of identified every building we possibly can that Tunbridge Moorland own, and we've covered it with solar panels. Now the great thing about that is it's mainly the leisure centres there where we've been concentrating. But the amount of electricity that's saving and the generation of income from those panels now is huge. You can see it in the report. I won't go through each income revenue stream there, but you can see how valuable that is as a resource, but more importantly, valuable at reducing carbon. So that's been hugely successful. Now some geeky pictures that I took, I'm afraid. The one on the left there, you can't really get the scale of that, but that's taller than me. And that's all the micro switches that are being installed as we speak at Larkfield Leisure Centre, which will then control the next geeky picture, which is on the right there, which is a massive bank of air source heat pumps. The size of that piping that comes out the back of those it's around about 10 inches in diameter, just to give you an idea. It's a huge project to obviously take away the gas boilers out of Larkfield Leisure Centre. It's due to be commissioned in, I think, the next month or so, if it's all going to plan. I know Power Networks has been a bit of a headache to us, but we are getting there. But the project itself, the best thing about this project was that around about 90% of it was covered by external grants. So the actual cost to Tunbridge Moorland was very, very small compared to the overall cost of the whole project. But the carbon reduction and obviously connected with the solar PV panels, it's going to make Larkfield Leisure Centre virtually carbon neutral, which is a massive achievement for very little spent, which is great. Then moving on to Gibson, I'll just say a few words about Gibson. Sorry, yeah, there's the rest of the solar panels. I didn't finish that, did I? You got Tunbridge swimming pool on the left, and again the top of Larkfield Leisure Centre on the right. I couldn't not include my cabinet colleague Des Kears, who's in charge of leisure, to pop up on the roof with me. So all in all, yeah, as I say, we've pretty much maxed out with solar panels. Right, so Gibson East, Gibson West, again, massive success there in dealing with KCC. So I've got to say thank you to Stuart for perseverance, and also to Adrian in dealing with KCC on a covenant that's been covering this particular building, Gibson West, which has been such an onerous covenant, restricting us from pretty much doing anything with the building. So to actually negotiate with KCC and get that relieved, it then opened up the doors for us for the next for our plans, and that was to obviously condense staff into Gibson East, and then with this building, which is so maintenance hungry and so inefficient, costs us a fortune, around about £250,000 a year. It's a bit of a noose around our neck. Lovely that it is, it's just not fit for purpose for a modern council. So this works now enables us to separate the two, and you've probably seen that as you arrived here tonight. The link corridor is now gone, and the building actually has now gone back to its original heritage looks, really, standing alone. So that's an improvement for sure. And once we've finished refurbishment works in Gibson East, again, we'll be installing air source heat pumps, solar panels, and Gibson East, after work is completed, will be carbon neutral, which is brilliant. But the best thing about it is the utility costs will be significantly lower because of the increased insulation, PV panels, etc. And then that gives us the opportunity to look at Gibson West and how best we review the offers that hopefully come flooding in for it. Fingers crossed. And then finally, I'm going to keep the best till last. So this is the creme de la creme of the whole year, really. It's a first for Tunbridge and Morling, a project like this. Temporary accommodation. It's a huge expense to Tunbridge and Morling in provision cost, particularly nightly paid accommodation when we haven't got enough of our own temporary accommodation available. So to try and work our way by purchasing our own accommodation, which we've done, and we'll leased, and then this very first project of actually building our own temporary accommodation for that purpose is a massive milestone for Tunbridge and Morling. So this is the example of what members approved on the 27th of January. It's modular homes, although you wouldn't think it was. It's the way it's been designed is it's exemplar in the building and industry. But basically 12 family homes we've got there. But importantly, in the north of the borough, at Bluebell Hill car park, just a redundant car park at the end of the day. Not really much use to anybody, but now we have a scheme where we're going to look after 12 families in the north of the borough when they're in desperate situation, losing their homes. And so not only does it obviously fit that purpose of finding a home for families in the north of the borough, but at the same time saves us a significant amount of money of nightly paid accommodation. And even more importantly, it means then that the location of where it is means that if there's children involved, the likelihood is they won't have to change schools, because the nearest accommodation probably would have been Tunbridge at best. And if we haven't got, then they could potentially even be out of borough in nightly accommodation. So this sort of fits the bill in so many different ways, but gives security to people that are in a very, very difficult situation. And the best part of it is that they're carbon neutral. So on each home, you can just see there's solar panels, and they will feed into each individual home and cut their utility bills significantly. It's an important part because when you're in that situation, naturally you're going to be financially stressed. So moving into a temporary accommodation like that, where the utility bills will be significantly low, is obviously a massive helping hand when you're in that situation. So just to give you the building classification, it's going to achieve an EPC rating of A. That's the top rating for efficiency for a building. So that will start. I think the contracts have now been signed, fingers crossed. But the best thing about it as well is the LAHF funding that went towards it. So again, the cost of Tunbridge and Morling are actually developing this project has been significantly reduced by that funding. So that's the end of my report. There's lots more to come, of course. but I'll save that for the next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. That was very thorough, very interesting. Any questions? Luke.
Thank you, Chair. I want to make a brief comment on the shop front scheme. I'd like to thank the Cabinet member for his work, and it's fantastic to see so many businesses applying for these grants. 6 of the 33 are from Scotland. I also want to thank my colleague, Councillor Sue Bell, for her work on this, which was done before I was elected. This administration, with the support of Councillor Betts, is proud to back our local businesses because they are the backbone of our community. By investing in our town centres with the help of them to grow and succeed. In return, our businesses support Tunbridge Malling every day. They don't just serve our community, they help build it.
Thanks, Luke.
Hello, not really a question again. All the savings have been made in 5.1.1 from all the solar panels and things. You've got about £70,000 worth there. Where's it going to go?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so though the Leisure Trust are responsible for utility usage at leisure centres under the management agreement. So savings will flow to them, but in effect, kind of flow to the council in terms of the overall management agreement is sort of how it works. I mean, outside of my remit in terms of property, but that's the way that I understand it.
Okay, anybody else? James?
Thank you. Just again on 511, it's all really good work. I suppose my question is, in terms of all the capacity for solar panels, switching over to LED light fittings, etc., have we now basically hit all the low-hanging fruit here, or are there more opportunities for those, or are we expecting in future years it's going to be harder to find equivalent progress to make?
You're quite correct, James. We obviously concentrated on the best value for money carbon reduction measures that we could find. And the first one on the list was obviously covering our buildings in solar panels. Because not only do they reduce carbon significantly, they also obviously clearly generate electricity, which is a massive saving. So they do pay for themselves very, very quickly. Some of these schemes, the payback is less than 3 years, particularly when we're going through the high energy costs. The payback is even quicker then. But you're quite correct. It gets tougher and tougher now to find those carbon savings, finding those efficiencies as we go through. But nonetheless, we're still concentrating on that, and we're still finding ways to do that. The example, obviously, is the waste services contract. That's another big emitter of carbon, and obviously, the biggest effect that we're looking at on that one is the use of HVO in the fuel that they use, rather than going over to electric, which the technology is not really there yet for large waste vehicles. They're more suited really to the hydrogen stroke electric option. And that really hasn't quite been mastered yet, but it's evolving. But in the time, whilst we're waiting for that technology to evolve and be viable, then the HVO is a massive bonus. And in fact, it reduces carbon by 90%. So there are other areas that we're looking at, we're still focusing on and working on. And there's lots more to come. I know that I've got, I won't say too much, but I'm working on some other projects. I know Stuart's going to be putting his head in his hands, but we've got to rush these through as quickly as we can before regeneration happens. But it's not going to it's not going to stop me, put it that way. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Anybody else? Okay, are we happy to note that report? Thank you. Okay, MTFS, which I think is Paul.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This is an information report on the MTFS position, taking into account the impact of the budget that's going to be presented to Council next week. I'm just going to start off and just remind members of why we have an MTFS, what its purpose is and what the objectives are. The MTFS is a 10-year plan. It sounds a lot but I've got 10 years to get it right over the time when we get there. It gives us what we call a going concern projection, which our auditors like to have, and the government also likes us to have as well. It helps us identify any major financial issues that could be arising over the next 10 years on that. It allows us to also reasonably plan for any funding gaps that we may have, rather than taking a knee-jerk reaction, which happens to be a direction that an awful lot of our neighbouring boroughs take. They have a situation where they have a budget gap and they say, well, okay, we've got to find that within 1 year. Previous iterations we've stretched these out over up to sort of 6-year time period to allow the members to actually assess what impact we can take at any particular time. So moving back to the objectives, these are shown in paragraph 3.5 on page 36, but there are 3 key ones that I normally focus on. The first one is that we've got to have a balanced budget without the use of reserves in year 10. In other words, we should be contributing money to reserves rather than taking the money out at year 10. The general revenue reserve, which is our, how can I put this play, touch it and die money, as I would like to refer to it. It's the one that we have money put away for a rainy day in case something major happens. That balance should be above £3 million in our final year. And ideally, during over the entire 10-year programme, that figure should not fall below £2 million. So I'm now going to move back to last year. And we set the budget in, well, you set the budget, I should say, in February 25. That was the MTFS as well. There was a funding gap of £2.8 million at that stage, with a target of £600,000 to be achieved by April 26, included within the budget. I can tell you now that was achieved. £602,500 was actually found, and that has actually been included within the budget for 26-27. And details for that can be shown in paragraph 5.2 on page 37. So moving on to this year's updates, what's been included in this year's update? Well, I've updated it for the budget that's being presented over in Scrutiny, to Cabinet, and will be what's going to members at Council next week. I've based the information is based upon a Band D council tax of £252.65. That will be a figure you'll be hearing an awful lot next week. That is a 3% increase on last year's, and that is in line with the government's referendum limits that we are set by government. What else have I got included in there? Well, Councillor Betts, I think, has actually mentioned all of the things I was about to say, but I'm going to go through them again. Starting off with the biggest issue we've got, it's the waste contract. Tenders have now been received back. We are assessing them, and there are reports coming to members both in March, and contract award will take place in April. Once that figure is finalised, the first thing I have got to do is revise the MTFS. I can't go into any more details than that at this stage, and you'll get details in the next few months on that. Office accommodations included, so where we are looking to move back into Gibson East and ultimately do something different with this building, there's going to be a saving on the utility costs, business rates and everything else. I've allowed for £200,000 in the MTFS on that. The increased use of council-owned or leased homeless accommodation has been mentioned. We've got 2 projects on the go, one of which is the one at Bluebell Hill. It's hoped that those 2 schemes will generate anything between £100,000 and £200,000. So I've allowed for £100,000 in the first year, £200,000 in the second, and the remaining through. And we also talked about the impacts on the Leisure Trust, and we're including a service fee of £400,000 in for the Leisure Trust, partly due to developments down at the Angel Centre, but partly due to the fact that we are giving them an awful lot of infrastructure for them to save money on efficiencies on that. So what else is included? Well, the settlement. Sharon and I and Neil have been going on for years about fair funding review, business rates reset. It's finally happened. So what happens? So the figures you've got in here are based on the provisional settlement that was announced in December. I literally got it 2 days before I was going on holiday before Christmas. That was a really joyous Christmas present for us in accountancy. And we looked at it, and I spent a lot of time between Christmas and New Year trying to get to the bottom of the figures. So the final settlement was announced last week, and any of you who tuned into Cabinet last week will find out there were some changes made. So business rates. there were no changes to the figures we received on business rates. So the 3 years that we have on the settlement have been assumed to be the same for business rates for the 3 years. That's a positive. However, 26-27, as in next year, the government found that they got the figures wrong, partly because of the business rates issues. They forgot that some of us were in a pool, which we were. With the pool is being dissolved at the end of this financial year, but we were in a pool. Well, that gives us greater rates income. So they hadn't realised that, so they had to adjust. The figures have come down by £342,000. But the government has managed to find that magic sofa that they seem to have, and have managed to find £342,000 to compensate us for it. So overall, for 26-27, I am quite happy to say that I haven't had to go and change all the budget report or anything else for next week's council, which is a good thing. But they did reduce 27-28. It's come down by £173,000. So I've had to take that into account on the update to the MTFS that's going into the budget book for next week. 28-29, no change. They're quite happy with that. They've said that's where we need to be. So from then on in, I've allowed for business rate inflation at the Bank of England's recommended rate of 2%. I've also allowed for a flat line level on the revenue support grant because I've simplified it to 2 grants: business rates, revenue support grant. That's all there is now. We haven't got new homes bonus. We haven't got national insurance, section 31 grants. They've ruled that all in, made it a lot simpler for us. But they have, it's sometimes more difficult for us to track. So that's all come in, and I'll come to the outcome in a minute. I've also included some reserve movements that were agreed by Cabinet last week. These are, we're putting an extra £3.5 million into the Angel development. The local plan, I've added another 225,000 to, and local government reorganisation of 700,000. The reasons for this are given in the report, so I'm not going to go into them too heavily because they've been debated both at Cabinet and we'll probably have some more going on next week. Some of you might remember a few years ago, our auditors came in and said, yeah, you've got a really good MTFS, but you don't do anything else with it. You don't do any sensitivity analysis. So Sharon and I undertook some sensitivity analysis last year, and I've done some more this year. Now, from the inflation rates I've assumed from next year onwards are going to be close to the Bank of England's rate. Well, the OBR, Office of Budget Responsibility, are giving us a similar level. They're saying it could be about 2.5% this year, but it will drop to 2% by the end of the year. So by the time we get to setting the budget again, we're hoping it's going to be down to 2%. So I've assumed that 2% level through, but in the report, I have included some details in Section 8 that considers this and says, okay, what will the impact be overall? So what's the outcome of all of this? So the 35-36 budget sounds a long way away now, but will be a contribution to the general revenue reserve of 317,000. Your report says 318, £1,000. That's brilliant. The reserve changes in the reserve in the settlement though does affect reserves. So the reserve levels at the end of it reduces from 4.814 million to 619 million. But the balance is not below 2 million. So I've said there's a balanced budget. We're above the 3 million and we're not dropping below the 2 million. Tick, tick, tick. I'm happy at the moment on this stage. So we've kept that. The biggest issue on this is there is a zero funding gap. And before and I've forgotten here, finally, you might ask why no funding gap? When they were talking about fair funding, business rates reset, and many years ago, this has been going on for, there was a thing mentioned called negative RSG, i.e. they were going to actually take money away from us to top up other local authorities. So Sharon and I predicted the worst case scenario on this. It hasn't been as bad as we thought it was going to be. And that's allowed us actually to put money back into the budget, both what we're going through on this. So the grant settlement was bad because we've lost money compared to where we were this time last year, and where we're going to be in 28-29. We've lost just under £900,000. That's a lot of money for any local authority. Actually, we were expecting it to be a lot worse than that. It's the reason why the position was. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Kim?
Thank you, Chair. We'll all welcome a zero funding gap, but I have to say, even though I do trust you completely, Paul, it does concern me somewhat when we've had to save hundreds of thousands of pounds every year, year on year, and at a time when government funding is reducing. It just has, I've just got a little niggle in my head that a zero funding gap is probably a dangerous way to go. So that's one question. It won't surprise anyone that the Angel Centre section interested me significantly. And can you just tell me if I've read this properly? It reads to me as though there's a potential for building the new Angel Centre with no loan requirement. And as a result of that, I assume we would do that by emptying the coffers. And I think I saw that the General Revenue Reserve, I think you just alluded to it as well, is going down to the regulatory minimum of 3 million from 11 million. I seem to remember we had about 11 million in there at one point. So firstly, is that correct? And if it is correct and we have no loan, can you tell me if the Leisure Trust will still be expected to contribute at the same level if we don't have loan repayments to meet? Because obviously we will be short of investment income. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Let's start off with the zero funding gap. I, like you, was concerned about the fact that I've suddenly found this a pot of gold, but the fact is it's turned out a lot better than I thought it was. My worry was that 28, 29 onwards, is there going to be a continued drop in our support? And I've spoken to consultants across the board on this, and all the impressions we are being given is that 28, 29 figure is where the government says what we should need in government support. So the assumption has got to be that I've taken a scenario where the revenue support grant is not going to go up at all, but business rates will, because business rates do go up by CPI every year. So I've taken that assumption on the grounds that I've consulted with consultants we employ on this specifically to go through this with us. And I specifically asked that question, look, I have another scenario here. And he said, no, our reaction to this is that where you are in 28, 29 is where the government thinks you should be. Again, who knows what's going to happen in 28, 29, and I may have to redress that. And I have said in there the fact that there isn't a savings transformation strategy for this year. It doesn't mean that I could be resurrected in a few years' time because of what's going on. But at the present time, based on the information I've got and discussions I've had with far more intelligent people than me on the understanding how the government thinks, their rhetoric is that no, this is on that. The Angel Centre, I'm trying to pull together everything I possibly can at the moment for that. There is always the option of borrowing on that. I haven't built any borrowing in for the time being, but there could be on that. You mentioned about our reserves. Yes, the reserves do drop quite drastically, but partly the reason of that is because the increase in cost of our revenue, our refuse contract, that is predicted to jump quite significantly in the plan, and that was built in last year. There was a planned reduction in the reserves any case because of that, and it was the fact that we were looking at further reductions with the 2.8 in order to get us to a balanced position. So yes, so coming back to the Angel, yes, I'm still working on that at the moment, a lot of that, and we had already built in the potential loss of income from our own investments at that stage, and that is included within this. And the 400,000 I've got in there is hopefully what I'm looking to that's a starting point for me. It's not the end point. So we're working on it. That's all I can say on that at this particular time. I will be looking to bring a report back with the final stages to say, okay, how are we going to fund this project? And that will be every option available to us on how we're going to deal with it.
When are we likely to know those figures, Paul?
I'm going to quickly look at Stuart very quickly there because I'm trying to remember when Reba Stage 4 is kind of approved. Is it May, I think? Oh. Yep. So October, the October Council.
But I'd hope we'd have the figures long before
We
that.
will have information certainly before that, but I'm certainly going to be working on those figures, and I'm working on them as we speak now.
And the figures that we've quoted to the Leisure Trust for contributions.
That is a subject to discussion that's going on at the present time. I'm actually involved in the service fee negotiation on that at the moment, and it's not only from the Angel Centre, it's from other matters that we are taking into account, namely things like that we've managed to save their energy bill quite significantly. If you cast your mind back to COVID, when you were involved with the Cabinet, we were paying £700,000 a year to the Leisure Trust. We aren't paying them anything anymore now on that. So that's been quite a generous help, partly because of that, but also down to falling energy prices as well. Okay.
Thanks, Paul. Just question, do you know which committee the Angel Centre spend is going to come to? Will it come?
I'm not too sure which one. It may be through Cabinet, but I would have probably thought it might be over in Scrutiny as well. It's certainly got to come to Council because it's a big enough project to come to Council. So I'll check with Adrian and come back on that.
Thank you. Kim.
Anita and I met with officers last Friday and we asked for various reports to come through before it comes to overview and scrutiny in April, I believe. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, are we happy to note that? We got a, beg your pardon, Wendy, sorry.
Sorry, just can I ask, the waste contract, obviously with the reorganisation, they could only be working for maybe a year or 2 years. So is the rise that you're talking about including penalties where they may only have a contract for a couple of years?
For you, Chair. Actually, no, the contract remains live at reorganisation date. So we are sitting a 12-year contract. That 12-year contract will be inherited by the new authority under local government reorganisation. It then is down to the new unitary when they're set up to align their contracts when they come up for renewal. I went through this at Medway. For my sins, I worked at Gillingham Borough Council in 97, 98, transferred over to the new authority, and contract alignment was a big issue for them to get sorted. Gillingham had outsourced their refuse collection. Rochester had their in-house direct service organisation. And it took a number of years to get those aligned, but they did get them aligned. And the same thing will happen with this one. So fortunately, the refuse contract is a joint contract between us and Tunbridge Wells. If West Kent comes off in the guise it is, two of the authorities are already aligned. It's Sevenoaks and Maidstone we've then got to get aligned with and go on from there. So though there's no need for penalty contracts because everything that we've got in place now in respect to contracts will be inherited by the unitary authority. If they decide to do something different, that's down to them and they will have to deal with the thing. But I have to assume on this basis, we are a going concern, i.e. reorganisation doesn't actually happen for us. And I have to assume that at this stage until the legislation is put in.
Let's hope that reorganisation doesn't happen. Mark.
Thank you very much. I just still not a member of your board. Thank you for allowing me to speak. As I understood it, the level of reserves was always projected to decrease with time anyway, because of the anticipated decrease in funding from central government. And on the point that you've just made, Chairman, I'm really pleased to see that there's an allowance here, that £700,000 for that local government reserve, and I hope and pray that local government reorganisation doesn't happen, and we can find that £700 back in our general reserve.
I think we might be up against it on that one, but we can but hope. Okay, any more questions? Happy to note that report. Very much. Okay, on to the Tunbridge swimming pool boiler replacement, and I'm going to hand back to Robin on this one. I'm going to hand back to Stuart. Beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is a report. There's a target in the 2025-26 annual service delivery plan for us to have a look at the decarbonising options for Tunbridge swimming pool, having made progress with several other of our sites. So at section 6 of the report, that feasibility study, a summary of it is set out showing the various different options, both capital expenditure as well as the resultant impact on running costs. The original intention had been to undertake this piece of work that would support a future application for a public sector decarbonisation scheme application. That was the scheme that we were successful for both Larkfield Leisure Centre and Polwood Golf Centre. However, as we were moving through this process, government withdrew that particular funding stream and hasn't replaced it with any other funding stream, meaning any work that we do here would need to be funded entirely by the council. Just in terms of other options, there's unfortunately not a do nothing option. Existing gas boilers are original to the building and over 30 years. Need to do something, and so the report just sets out those options that we've looked at, with the proposal being that we progress with a like for like placement. Obviously, the risks of we could one option might have been to wait it out to see whether the government did introduce kind of form of external grant that we could apply for. However, the risks there with the aging boilers is that we are already struggling a little bit with obtaining spare parts for those boilers. So we do run the risk of there being service disruption to the centre, which with a resultant impact on the income that site can generate for both the trust and therefore us. So yes, happy to take any questions.
Rob.
Can I just clarify, is the like for like replacement the quickest option as well as the cheapest?
Yes, it would be, because from a design perspective, there would be an element of design work even for a like for like basis, but it will be fairly limited on the basis that it's relatively straightforward, it says. But much more straightforward than having to factor in a new technology into old plant and equipment, which, as we found at Larkfield, does bring its own challenges, especially with new electricity supplies, new transformers. Working with UKP is a particular challenge and a risk to a project like this. So yes, it would be the quickest and simplest route.
Thanks, Stuart. I'll come to you in a second, Mark. Can I just ask a question, because I'm obviously being blind here? What is the cost of is it the 300,000 for the like? Okay, sorry, I was being blind. Mark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This isn't a gotcha question at all, because I know that it doesn't matter what part of the chamber you sit on. We're all disappointed that the public sector decarbonisation scheme funding has dried up, and it seems. Looking at the scheme, to go it alone, the length of time that it would cost this authority or a successful authority to recoup that amount of money for those ground source heat pumps makes it unviable. But the like for like gas boilers, if they're going to be over 90% efficient, and we're going to have potentially 20 to 30% additional efficiency. I was a little disappointed that there wasn't an additional row at the bottom of the table to illustrate how much more efficient that option was going to be. And my other question, again, this isn't a gotcha question. I know that with all the best intentions, the council had an ambition to have carbon neutral leisure centres. I'm assuming because of that would have relied on the public sector decarbonisation funding continually. I'm guessing that is just impossible now.
Thanks, Mark. Stu or Robin? Either or.
Thank you, Chairman. That's a very good point Councillor Hood's made. It is majorly disappointing that the public sector decarbonisation scheme has ended pretty much. That was our saving grace for Larkfield. It was a mammoth task to actually get through that grant application. But with Kerry, our past climate change officer, and Stuart and team, they did an amazing job and were successful. With this one, it's, we've been through the process of identifying what's needed, but at these costs and without that grant, it's just not financially viable. That said, though, you're quite right. Maybe it would be useful once we know the actual spec of the new boilers, we can give more accurate carbon reduction, because there will be carbon reduction, obviously, because the new boilers will be 90% plus efficient. So we're going to get some carbon improvement there. But you might have seen in the report, there's just a snippet. It's a tease, I think. Trying to find where that is. But basically, it's in other options. I gave just a tease there that I've got some ideas. I can't quite say too much at the moment, but there are ideas whereby those ultra efficient gas boilers, where we can look at offsetting that at least in a far better or improved financial viability way in terms of cost of that offsetting. Pound for pound for carbon reduction. I've got some ideas how we can potentially. I can't say too much now because we're sort of just in the throes of thinking of how to put a report together on it. But I think there's going to be a valuable way of how we address that in a I can't say in a significantly reduced cost, put it that way. But the other problem we've got as well, obviously, as has been mentioned all night, is LGR. That's a problem we've got. We're trying to race ahead with these projects, and poor old Stuart and team looks at cabinet members with his head in his hands, because we're trying to race through these projects that are going to benefit our communities before LGR puts the shutters down. Hence the reason we're accelerating with the Angel Centre, accelerating with improvements on our leisure centres to make them basically fit for purpose for generations to come, with extremely low utility costs. And we're working our way through them all, but we're just worried that imminently those shutters are going to come down. But anyway, once I got an idea of this report of how it can come back to members, I'll give you a heads up.
Thanks, Robin. Can I ask Stu, can we get those carbon offset figures at some point? If we can come to the next meeting, perhaps, with those, that would be useful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no problem. I mean, yes, that will come through the detailed design phase in terms of getting accurate figures. I mean, if we were looking at, say, a 20% improvement in efficiency, at the moment, I think just looking at my figures, gas usage at the site, a 20% decrease would, I don't know, be around 450,000 kilowatt hours of gas a year. And that, from a financial point of view, maybe around 20k reduction in costs. That's based very initially, but those are sorts of the figures we might be talking about. But yes, more than happy to provide some details once we've moved through the more detailed design work. Yeah.
Thank you, Stu, and looking forward to our carbon offset those as well. Okay, any other questions? James.
Thank you. A couple of questions. On 10.2, where it talks about if we had adopted any of the heat pump options, we'd essentially have to increase borrowing by 1.734 to 4.594 million. It might be an accountancy failure on my part, but do we not need to subtract from that number the 300,000 we wouldn't spend on upgrading the gas boilers? And second question, with this sort of slightly disappointing news about viability of heat pumps, etc., should we be bracing for bad news about the new Angel Centre?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the borrowing figures, the 300,000 we wouldn't be borrowing to fund. So as you say, for the cheapest capital expenditure scheme, which was the combination, so it's not a full heat pump scheme, but it includes gas boilers, then yes, in theory, if you were to subtract 300k from that figure, you're down to about 1.4. And sorry, I just didn't catch the last part of the second question.
Just given the cost of heat pumps, etc., should we be bracing ourselves for bad news for the new Angel Centre build?
Thank you. I think that the particular challenge with Tunbridge Pool is its physical constraints. So we've got 0 external space at Tunbridge Pool to mount external compounds for heat pumps, etc. Whereas at least with the Angel Centre, it can be built into the design, so it's reflected from day one. It's always a challenge when you're trying to retrofit modern technologies into an older building. At Larkfield, it's a challenge, but it's slightly easier insofar as it's got a lot of space around it, so we're able to really spread out that kind of plant and equipment. At Tunbridge Pool, the plant areas are so tight that they're spread around about 3 levels, going from ground to up to second floor, very tight spaces. I've got to work out how I'm going to get the old boilers out without taking the roof off. So it's that site. It's all about the physical constraints because of the flooding risk. Any plant would have to be built at substantial height as well, which all adds cost. So that's why Tunbridge Pool is so difficult and so expensive. But at least with the Angel Centre, being able to design all of that in from day one just makes such a massive.
Thanks, Stuart. Any other questions? Happy to note that report. Very much. Work programme. If anybody has anything they want to add to the work programme, perhaps they could let me know by email. Guessing nobody's got anything that they want to add today. Okay. We have no urgent items and we don't need to move into part 2. So I'm going to close the meeting at 9:22. Thank you all very much.